When I ask you, what was Scott Peterson's motive for killing his wife, Lacey, you probably immediately do what I do. You say, well, he was having an affair with Amber Fry and he was so desperately in love with her that he killed his wife so he could be with his mistress. But I stumbled upon something interesting that made me think that I don't even think the police thought that that was fully his motive. Let's get into it. We left off after the last video where the police had done some searches of the Peterson home and they actually went to the warehouse as well. Scott voluntarily let them do that. Their initial response was that everything was too perfect, that they felt in their gut there was a crime scene here, that the guy had done something to his wife, but he just miraculously managed to clean up better than they'd ever witnessed anybody ever clean up before. And it just befuddled them. So they decided to get a search warrant, execute a pretty extensive search warrant on the Peterson home on the 26th and 27th of December. Now, keep in mind, there were people in and out of the house on the 25th. There was a lot of traffic to and around and inside the Peterson home before they had a chance to execute these search warrants. Doesn't change anything. I'm just mentioning that. There was a lot of activity going on, a flurry of activity. In fact, by the morning of the 26th, they already had a full volunteer headquarters set up at a nearby hotel, and there were hundreds of people already volunteering and combing the neighborhoods and handing out flyers. So there was a lot of activity in and around that house on the 26th. Keep that in mind for future videos. Anyway, so they execute the search warrant, and in the search warrant, they're looking, you have to state what you're kind of looking for. It can't just be a fishing expedition. So they want to prove that this is a crime scene. And they feel like it was a bloody crime scene. So they want to go back and they want to look at the baseboards and they want to look closer at the floors and the rugs and the furniture. And they're sure there's blood splatter somewhere. They're sure there's evidence there that he killed his wife. But they also need a motive because this is the 26th of December and they don't know about Amber Fry yet. So they are looking for a motive. Was it financial? What are their problems in the marriage? So of course they also take into evidence the computers. They take, things like photos and financial papers. So they take all this stuff into evidence. Now, let me tell you about two quick things that happened during this search that are important. So the first one is when you're searching a crime scene, you take a ton of photos. And there's a lot of photos that seem really benign at the point, right? Like here's a picture of the hallway, here's a doorway, here's a patio. They had a couple of pictures where there were different angles of their bedroom. And in the background of a couple of those pictures, you can see a clothes hamper, like an overflowing dirty clothes hamper. And it's one of those, it's like a tall round wicker basket and it's full. And then there's kind of clothes coming out of the top. There's no lid. And that was captured on a couple of photos. You wouldn't think anything of that, but I'm going to make a future video where I'm going to talk about that hamper. That was captured. Those pictures were captured during this trip. The other thing that's important to remember is they took out of that house more than 100 bags of physical evidence. There was more than 100 items that they tagged as evidence of a crime scene. They did all of the forensic testing on all of them and could not find any, and I mean zero evidence of a crime. No forensic evidence whatsoever that a crime took place in that house. They emptied Scott's vacuum cleaner bag. There's rumors that Scott was vacuuming. They emptied the bag. They brought in their own high-powered suction vacuums. They did everything. They scoured that house for 2 days and found zero physical evidence of a crime or of a cleanup. So at this point, they don't have a motive yet, and they don't have any proof that anything took place. Just poof, the wife is gone and they have no explanation. But their police intuition tells them that this guy's dirty and we got to figure it out. Well, what falls into their lap? On the 29th of December, Amber Fry puts pieces together and she figures out that Scott Peterson is the same guy who's missing his wife. On January 30th, she calls the Modesto Police Department and tells them of the story. From December 30th to January 24th, when she made her press conference, she was audio taping the calls between the two of them. And I'll get to that in another video. The police wanted this to go on forever. They thought the longer we can have this go on, the better. But the National Enquirer got a picture of Amber and Scott from that Christmas party, right? And they were going to blow the story. This is in all the documentaries. This is all very widely known. So they have to kind of ramp this up. So the police go to Sharon and Ron, Lacey's parents, and say to them, your son-in-law was having an affair, and here's a picture of him with his mistress, okay? That would have probably been enough to devastate them because they thought Scott was the perfect husband. You know that game where you tell two truths and a lie? They told one truth and two really big fucking lies. The first one was that they told Lacey's parents that there was blood evidence at the house, that they had collected all this evidence, had reason to believe that Lacey was murdered in that home and that Scott did it. And that's what the evidence is telling them. Even though they didn't find anything on that evidence, they told Lacey's parents that they had, or they indicated that they had. Then they also told her parents that Scott, just a few months earlier, had taken out a life insurance policy on Laci for $250,000, which was absolutely not fucking true. If you still believe that to this day, it is not true. It was disproven in court. The last life insurance policies issued to Scott or Laci, in fact, it was both of them together, was in April of 2001, a full 20 months before Laci went missing. And it was before she was pregnant. It was before Scott had met Amber. So it was no part of a motive, really, because it had happened so long ago. And it was part of their financial planning. They met with their financial planner and he's like, listen, you guys got to protect yourselves. We should have life insurance policies. Those three things got out into the press, right? The girlfriend, the life insurance, the blood evidence. He was cooked. He was cooked in the court of public perception. You and I, Nancy Grace squawking on our face telling us he did it, we believed it. But here's what's interesting. The police, having not found any evidence in that first round, they thought, we got to go back. They got another warrant on for February 18th and 19th to go back and search the house again. This time they told the judge they believed it was a soft kill, meaning not a bloody massacre, but something like a suffocation, something like a strangulation or a poisoning. And now they wanted to go back and look for evidence of a soft kill. So what they were looking for was things like poisons or over-the-counter medicines. They feel like maybe Scott subdued her and then choked her and she couldn't fight back. So they're kind of on this other trail. Now, they still very much think Scott did it, but they can't prove it. They have no evidence that he did. And what's interesting is when they asked for the search warrant, they didn't tell the judge the same things they told Laci's parents. They didn't mention a life insurance policy. They didn't mention blood evidence. In fact, they said, we haven't found any of that. We think it's a soft kill. But let me show you real quick what they put in the paperwork for the motive. This is what the police told the judge when trying to get a second search warrant for the home on February 18th and 19th. Motive of the crime could be linked to Scott's failing business, in addition to the pressure to become a parent when having no desire to have a child, and the expensive desires of his wife, Laci Peterson, including Laci's want of a new vehicle and a new home. Keep that in mind for future videos. Scott's continued desire to have a relationship with Amber Frey may add to the motive. So when you come into the comments and say, he had a girlfriend, that was the motive, the police didn't even think that was his chief motive, because I'll get into that later, but they might not have found it significant enough that a man would commit murder over. Let's just put it that way. They thought it was financial, that Laci had extravagant tastes and perhaps Scott felt some financial pressure. And that was another thing they weren't really able to prove in court. Yes, they had some credit card debt, but they also had other means of open to buys on other credit cards that seemed fine. So the point I'm trying to make is that the police went to Laci's parents and said, there's blood evidence, there's an insurance policy, he has a girlfriend. Got them riled up, and sure enough, right after Amber came out in the public as having an affair with him, Laci's family got up to a microphone and said, we no longer think Scott is innocent. Like, we actually think Scott harmed Laci. And they flipped sides like that. And that's what the police needed, because all along she had been a staunch supporter of Scott and they had defended him. Every single time anybody asked her, did Scott do this? She's like, no, this is silly. They have a loving marriage. Don't even ask that question. Scott didn't do this. And she flipped like that because of the lies of the police. But when they went to look for a search warrant, they told a judge a different story. That to me is reasonable doubt. I'm going to follow right behind this with a video about the clothes hamper and why those photos are so critical if you look at them from a different way. So come on back for more.